to Impact. I'm Barbara Brabetz. Today on the Science and Education segment, we're going to get down and dirty with musical instruments as part of our Christmas show. So here we go. Dr. Ed Stander, you are back for an encore performance.
I couldn't leave this little dark cubby. It's just a most wonderful place.
Another year, another Christmas show.
I feel older too.
Yeah, so we're pulling out all the stops this year. Last year you brought one instrument.
Do you know what that means, pulling out all the stops?
I think it's an organ reference.
That's right. I didn't bring an organ with me.
It wouldn't fit in here.
I tried to transplant it. It wouldn't fit.
Well, speaking of organs, let's transition instead to the nose flute, one of the four instruments you brought with us today.
Already?
Already.
Okay.
Do you want to say more?
I was going to explain that what I've done is I brought four instruments from four different cultures to show how Christmas is celebrated by music in different places by playing the same piece of music four different times, because I only know one piece of music, with four different instruments.
Okay, so four different instruments, four different cultures, and some science behind how they make that noise.
You betcha.
All right, so you betcha, let's start.
Okay, so the first instrument I brought, because I don't have a lot of energy right now, is my nose flute.
Nose flute.
Yes, they come various types. This is a very old one. The original name for the nose flute was the humanitone, and it goes on your nose.
Okay.
See, just like that. It's really quite disgusting. I'm glad there's nobody here to laugh, except for the producer who laughs at anything I say, so it's no problem. And what you do is you blow through your nose, through this, and this acts like sort of like a flute right here. And then you change the size of your mouth to get different tones.
So it's like whistling through your nose?
It's like whistling through your nose.
Okay.
It's really quite disgusting. And since I have a cold, it's particularly difficult because sometimes more than this air goes through that hole and then it sort of blocks up and becomes difficult. However, it's okay because you can still play classical music with this if you get too much. Actually, you know what kind of classical music you can play?
Tell me.
Sonata. Anyway.
Sonatas. So wait. Before we start with the playing, do they come in different pitches? Like, are they keyed?
No, you change the key by changing the size of the back of your mouth.
Ugh.
So yeah, it's very similar to, throat singing or anything else. If you change the size of a cavity, you change the tone that it produces. For example, whoa, what you're doing is just changing the size of your mouth and it's making a different sound.
Okay.
So let me just try this for you, okay?
All right, let's do it.
We're doing Hark the Heralds, Angels Sing.
In case we can't identify it by nose flute?
Which I used to think was wondering who heralds angels were. And then I saw the TV show Charlie's Angels and I realized there was probably one like that in heaven too called Herald's Angels. Here we go.
Excellent. That must take an awful lot of concentration.
It's very, very difficult. It's one of the most difficult instruments in the world to play. In fact, in the box that I got this from, it said only a child can do it. So one has to focus their inner child to actually make this work.
Well, let's move on to the next
instrument.
Inappropriately named instrument.
Now this is an instrument that actually is almost impossible to play Christmas carols on. It's a Jew's harp.
Okay.
And as you know, Jews don't do Christmas carols.
Well, except for a few, I know.
Except for a few, yes. This one happens to be from Russia, which is why you're able to. This is actually used for shamanic rituals. They would play this thing over the body of somebody who's very sick, and they would laugh themselves back into health.
Can we kind of hold it up a little bit more? So there's not much to it, really.
No, it's absolutely nothing. It is a piece of material that vibrates back and forth, and all that sound is vibration. And I can actually play it. You hear it? It's very, very nice.
Very low.
Right. So what you use is you use your entire skull to amplify the sound. So what I do is I hold my teeth against the two sides here, and my teeth start to vibrate, my head starts to vibrating. It's a lot cheaper than drinking.
Well, it's a good decongestant, I bet. So that's your tongue making it vibrate?
No, this is vibrating by itself, but my tongue is making the sound give a vibrato to it.
Okay. So
And
it's
I
one
can-
note, really? Because
No.
you can't really change the sound of
You
your
can
skull?
change you can change the tone of the inside of your mouth again.
Okay.
So if I make my mouth bigger, it's a deeper voice. If I make it smaller, it's a louder one, higher one. And so I change that by moving my tongue.
Okay, so tongue movement
Right.
and opening up the back of the throat to the extent
Exactly.
you can.
So in that respect, it is quite Christian because you can play in tongues. Okay.
So it's kind of like a kazoo?
Not even close.
Okay, well, there's my one shot.
Okay. So I will play the same song now, so you can get an idea of the difference of how this would sound on the Russian steppes.
Well, before we start, are there any Star Wars critters who had a Jew's harp for a voice?
Actually, no. But the voice of the robot in The Day the Earth Stood Still. All comes from this as well.
I see. Well,
Now,
that's a
now-
different sound.
Don't you feel much healthier now?
I feel like I've at least sung a Christmas carol or two today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can play almost anything you can hum, and not hum, but move your mouth to with
Well,
this
that's
instrument,
just about anything.
which is absolutely amazing considering that, again, this is a $25 instrument.
And doesn't take any tuning?
We can't even try to tune it. I mean, it only plays one key.
One key.
On the
you
other
do
hand,
the
if you
rest.
can find a lock that it'll fit, it will open it.
It does look like a key.
Anyway, that's instrument number 2.
So that was the Jew's harp.
Yes, otherwise known as a chomus, C-H-O-M-U-S,
Okay.
or a Jaws harp, if you don't happen to like Jew's harp as a name.
And where does it come from? Is it really of Jewish origin or of Middle Eastern?
Almost every culture in the world has that instrument in it somewhere, suggesting it may have come from outer space.
Well, that could be, since Robbie the Robot talked like it.
Well,
so-
Robbie the Robot came from the United States, of course.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and then he was sent to outer space. So it's possible this may be a perfect example of what happens when everybody in the universe, this might be the universal instrument for that matter.
Well, I'll take that. So, speaking of universal instruments, we have an instrument coming up next,
The next one.
which can cut down your Christmas tree and give you a carol.
Yes, yes. This happens to be a crosscut saw as compared to a rip saw.
Okay.
And this is actually a musical saw. This was actually made by the Stradivarius Sandvik company
I don't see its mark.
on this side.
Oh, look at that.
It's the
See if
you
we
can't
can-
possibly show that, but it is the Sandvik Stradivarius. They make 50 of these a year. They're a regular saw, except for 2 things. First, on a regular saw, what they'll usually do is they'll cut 2 pieces of metal out of a piece of rolled steel, and as a result, the rolling direction is not exactly parallel to the saw, and that actually changes the saw sound a little bit.
Okay.
For the Sandvik
so
Stradivarius-
if we have more in grain here,
Right?
then
This actually
it's all
they
parallel.
only cut 1 piece of this at a time, so they throw away the stuff on the 2 sides.
I see.
And that produces a much cleaner sound. And what a saw is very interesting, is that to play it, you make an S curve, like that. You always want to play it so that, I use a bow, you always want to use the bow on the clean side. If you use it on the other side, then
The poor bow wouldn't last.
the bow doesn't last very long, that's right. Saws come in different sizes. Excuse me. This is a seesaw.
No.
I'm not kidding. This is a seesaw.
Letter C, saw.
Yeah, seesaw. And effectively what it does, it's like a series of bars, like a series of xylophone bars. And depending on where the bend is, like right here for now, that is the piece of the saw that vibrates.
Okay.
Here it doesn't vibrate, there it doesn't vibrate. So what you do is you change the shape of the saw, is you change the position where it's vibrating. There it is.
Wow,
Exactly.
so the resonance, there's a lot of resonating sounds in there all at
Yeah,
once.
and the thing is actually bowing like this, is going back and forth, and depending on where you hit it, you get different sounds.
And can you change it?
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm changing the place where it plays by changing the bend of it. And the the range of a saw depends on how wide it is down here and then how narrow it is at the top. Any saw will play, but you want to find a saw that's very wide and then very narrow.
So if I had a non-rusty saw at home that was somewhat flexible,
Yeah,
I could do this too?
yeah, and you can hit it too. So you don't actually have to bow it.
Well, our last instrument is the only one that needs to be plugged in today. Yeah, I'll say.
Apart from
And
me.
that is the theremin.
Theremin. And I'll just move this over here a little bit. There we go. The theremin is the only instrument in the world, or at least the first instrument in the world, that one doesn't have to actually touch. I'm going to move it down a little bit here so you can see it.
Yeah.
And effectively what's happening here is back in the old days when you had radios, old radios, and you turned the knob, you always got all this whistling. It's called heterodyne whistling. And this fellow, Leon Theremin, decided that if he could find a way of controlling it, you could make an instrument out of it, which is what he did. And it's really pretty disgusting.
So it's interference waves?
It's interference waves. It's two oscillators, two electronic oscillators. And when you get near this thing here, you actually increase the capacitance of one of them, which changes its frequency. And so you have two frequencies going at the same time, and they're slightly off. And that produces a beat frequency, and the beat frequency is what you hear.
So that was the physics lesson for the day.
So just
Well, we've heard that in every zombie movie since the 50s.
yes, and of course the day the Earth stood still as well.
Oh yeah, here we go again.
Yes, let's see. No!
So as soon as you get stuff over here that breaks the beat, breaks
Well-
the interference, because you weren't touching, I'm not sure if they could see at home, but you weren't touching the other antenna. And
No.
the closer you get, the difference the interference
The better
pattern
you look.
is.
Yeah, basically the way it works is on this side, there's two oscillators, okay? And this side, this turns one of the oscillators upside down. So you have two frequencies, and when two frequencies are going opposite of each other,
They cancel each
other out. So this is the volume control, which of course we don't need in this room because the louder it is, the better, I guess. And this one over here is the tone. So this just sounds like a radio, you see?
Not any radio that the general public
record
is.
player,
Yeah.
yes, right.
Right.
And you can change it. To me, it sounds like a scratchy record, but that's because I'm used to that sort of stuff.
Well, you're old.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, so nobody really puts this in the church for Christmas carols because it's so annoying.
Well, it's a wonderfully annoying instrument, isn't it?
Do people make albums
there
or?
There are concerts. Of course, there were the virtuosos.
There are virtuosos.
Yes, Clara Rockamore, who died a number of years ago, used to travel around the world playing with orchestras, and she actually made it sound good.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I understand you don't own just one of these.
No, you can't have just one.
They're like a potato chip?
They're very much like except you would not want to eat it. And yeah, you can't have just one. RCA theremins, which were made in 1929, are collector's items. One just went on a certain auction site just recently for $16,000.
Well, The Science of Music, yet again, by Dr. Ed Stander.
Should I
Would
play
you
you
like
out?
to play us out?
I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is crazy.
They've turned the channel at home.
Thank you so much, and I wish you a Merry Christmas.
You've been watching a very bizarre science and education segment here on Impact. My guest, Dr. Ed Stander, and I say, have a very Merry Christmas.
Have a very Merry Christmas, and don't do this at home.
Thanks for watching.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.